morning, everyone. And distinguished Professor Matthew Waldman. Thank you so much for being here, respected lecturers, and then faculty members of ITB, Faculty of Art and Design, and all dear students, researchers, and professionals that on all participants that come to today's public lecture. I am Ridwan, or you can call me MA. I'll be in charge as a moderator of today's session. So welcome to today's public lecture organized by FSRD, or Faculty of Art and Design ITB, funded by ITB Equity. And it's my pleasure to serve as your moderator in today's morning session. So thank you again for all of you joining us today. We are delighted to have participants from various backgrounds. Also welcome to Keio University Professor Yamoka Sensei and all the students. And who, we have various backgrounds who shares an interest in design, sustainability, and innovation. So today's lecture, without further ado, I will explain briefly about today's public lecture. So it's titled Circular Design, Material System and Innovation. As designers and researchers face increasingly complex environmental and social challenges, circular design has become more than simply a method of reducing waste. It invites us to rethink and how we design products, services, and systems by considering the entire life cycles and of materials and broader relationship between people, technology, and environment. So we are honored to welcome our speakers today, who work bridge industry, entrepreneurship, and academia. So let me read a little bit more about your background. Professor Matthew Waldman is a designer, inventor, entrepreneur, and academic at Keio Media Design, Keio University, Japan. He is a founder of NOOKA. Am I correct? Internationally recognized for its innovative approach to interface design and the visualization of the time. Throughout his career, Professor Waldman has worked across interactive design, user experience, branding, product design, and sustainable innovation. And his interdisciplinary approach has earned international recognition, including the prestigious Red Dot Design Award. Today, Professor Waldman will share his perspectives on how circular design can inspire new ways of thinking about material systems and innovation. So please join us in giving a warm welcome to Professor Matthew Waldman.
Okay.
Yeah. Professor, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you for having me. You can hear me fine, right? Okay, and also I like my presentations to be interactive, so I'll try to keep it short, and then I would like everyone to ask questions in the end. Also, thank you, Emma, for that excellent introduction. But the first part of my presentation is going to be more about innovation. I think that innovation is one of the most challenging parts of being a designer, and also very challenging for economies right now. Because we all know that design as a discipline is changing very rapidly with the adoption of AI and LLM models. And what I like that I see here in ITB is this commitment to craft. But what we'll see in the future is that craft, it's either going to get elevated or devalued, or both at the same time. So to try to think about innovation and how to get out to think outside of the box, I want to show you a little bit about my process first, in the first part of the presentation. And then I'll talk about the circular design and regenerative design projects that we do at Keio. Let's see. Oh, have to do a little techno switching here with the HDMI. So. Okay, so one of the things that I think is wonderful about a university education in design is that it's not just about making, but you also, as part of to graduate, you have to do presentations or dissertations or thesis. But I don't think enough attention is paid to language itself. Because people think, okay, let me just ask a question. Who here thinks that this statement is true? Raise your hand if you think this statement, it's a very simple statement, language equals communication. Raise your hand if you think it's true. Okay, raise your hand if you don't think it's true. Okay, not that many people. I do not believe that language is communication. I believe that language is purely a tool. And I think here at ITB, and also with Indonesians, you have to learn how to speak Bahasa, but everyone has a local dialect or language that they know. And then on top of that, you have to learn English. And the process of learning a new language, you meet some people that can't do it because they think language is communication. But how many times have you had a conversation in your native language where the other person didn't understand what you were saying at all? Have you had that experience? You're both speaking the same language, but you're not communicating. So communication is not language, and I think that's a great place to start to be a good designer and to explore innovation. And the example I want to give today, and again, not everyone has a microphone, so feel free to yell. I want everyone to be interactive. What do we see here? We see hands, right? And who can describe hands to me? What are hands in this photo in particular? This is not a trick question. Yes?
It's a human limb used for grabbing things.
Yeah? And what do we grab with?
With our hands. With our fingers.
With our fingers. And how many fingers do we have in this photo? 10. Okay, we're getting somewhere. How many fingers are in this photo? More than 10. There's 11. There's actually should be 12, right? It should be 6 on each hand. So this is something that's very, very important for what I'm going to be talking about. What is this? That's a clock. How many hours in the day? 12 or 24, right? So when we do arithmetic, all what we learn in our math and arithmetic is base 10 because we have 10 fingers. We evolved with 10 fingers, so we count on our fingers and our hands, and our maths became base 10. But time is base 12. So when you have a base 12, you go to 12 and then it resets back to 1. And on base 10, you have 10 and then it resets back to 1, or 11, 12. And when you have to calculate, let's say you're working 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, 3 weeks a month, 4 months a year. When you do the math for that, if you had to do it with time and you need to convert it into other like decimals, a percentage of time, you have to convert the base 10 into base 12. And this is a very important point. Like if everyone remembers when you're children, learning how to tell time takes more time for most children. And that's because this whole concept of going from base 10 to base 12 is not really explained, but we have these systems that use one type of math and systems that use another type of math. So who knows what other math use base 12 regularly? Not just time. Anyone? Dozens, yes, we're counting dozens, but also geometry is also base 12. So you have 360 degrees, it's divided by 12. So you have a base 12 maths and you have base 10 maths. And this is very important. It's connected to evolution and technology. And you also have different writing systems. Everyone knows that there are different writing systems for numbers, and this is very much tied to visual design and how do you express maths, right? So our visual systems for expressing maths only goes to base 10. So that's why when you have to convert, when you're calculating hours, you have to convert it to base 10 when you're doing the math. And our writing systems also, because of the concept, the language is now adhering to a base 10 concept. It's not necessarily reality, which is what I want to get to. So then this is a discussion point that came up in the US about 20 years ago, and it's still now, where Asian students score better on math. They do much better on their maths. Why do you think Asian students do better at math than a French student or an American student? Does anyone have an idea? Trust me, this whole conversation is going somewhere. Okay, I'll phrase the question differently. What do people say, like if you didn't have to edit yourself, like why are Asian students better at math than French or American students or English? What do some people say? Yes?
More discipline.
Okay. Discipline, right? What else do they say? Yes?
I think it's easier for our Asians to see some numbers like 11 and have a special word for 11.
Yeah, but what do people think when they ask that? What do you hear? What do bad people say? They think it's, some people say it's genetic. They say, well, Asians are genetically better at math. And so when you say that they're genetically better at maths, it kind of avoids the whole problem. So you just think, okay, well, Asians are good at math, and white people are good at, I don't know what white people are good at, not good for very much. But there's a real scientific reason, and it's not genetics and it's not discipline, as to why Asian youngsters are better at math. And it was what Keio was saying. So when you see this number, 13 and 30, in English, French, Spanish, 13 is 13 and 30 is 30. And in Asian languages, I'm just using Japanese as an example, I don't know about Indonesian, ju san and san ju. So what you have here thematically is the sound that represents the 3 and the 1 are in different orders in different languages. So in English, 13 and 30, I don't know if you ever thought about it, it's the same word. 13 is just 30 with an N on the end. So if you close your eyes and think about it, the word 13, 30, 30, 13, phonetically it's the same word. And the phoneme that represents 10 and the one that represents 3 is in the same position. So what happens in a child's brain who grows up speaking a Western language, their brain has to transpose the 3 and the 30. So there's an extra step, an extra cognitive load for Western students to learn math. And this is why they're slower at numeracy. And who here has studied French? French numbers are impossible, right? How do you say 90 in French?
4 times 20 plus 10.
Right. To say 90 in French, you have to say 4 times 20 plus 10. That's the actual word for 90. It's like, what the fuck? Yeah, it's like, so when you think about how the language and the concept, in most of the Asian languages, is this true in Indonesian? It's true in Japanese, Chinese, Hindi. Is Indonesian the numbers 13, 30? Is it the Asian system or the?
The thin and the thin is different.
Yeah?
The last and full.
Okay, so does it follow more the Asian rule? Or?
No, it's the same.
It's the same.
Change the word last and full.
Okay, cool. So then it's the same with all the words. So when you look at these words, you see that, okay, so what people thought was discipline. So if you thought that Western children don't learn math because they're not disciplined, and you try to discipline them more, you're putting your energy into the wrong endeavor, because it doesn't matter how much discipline you give them, the human brain has to create neurons and new connections, and the cognitive load for learning math, speaking a Western language, is higher. So you need a different approach, a different design approach, a different conceptual approach. So this is why I like to go back to language. Language is so important. And Yamaoka Sensei, we struggle with this too. In Japan, you get students presenting very complicated concepts, but if you can't explain it, then it's probably not a good concept, and vice versa. So I challenge everyone to go back to start with the concept. I'm not going to tell you which is more important, because I don't think you can make that decision, but how you express something in language is also very important, and how linguistics will also change your approach to design and innovation. So when I had this idea, when I started doing interaction design I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I was one of the first art directors with a website in 1995. And I saw the internet as this spiritual thing. I didn't see it as a business chance. I saw it as, oh my God, this is like Carl Jung's, he's a psychologist, and he wrote about this gestalt, that we're all connected subconsciously. Like when you go to class and everyone's wearing, like maybe 5 people are wearing a red shirt, and normally no one wears a red shirt, like this collective subconscious. When I started using the internet, I thought, oh my God, it's happening. It's really happening. So I started like building websites and animating poetry, and nothing that what it became. But when I started doing web design and UX design as a business, then I realized that, again, this is also counterintuitive to what you're learning at this school, is that aesthetics, when we evolve from like 2D design, like visual design, graphic design, aesthetics at one point were very important, like having a balanced, harmonious colors and balanced composition. And I realized that a lot of the websites back then were like really super ugly. So I had to challenge myself, is aesthetics part of design? And that's a question everyone here who's doing design should ask themselves all the time. We're not going to solve that problem today either. But in order to train myself out of aesthetics, I started exploring, okay, well, the screen is not the only thing we interact with. Like interaction design is not just screens and computers. Like when you have to put your shoes on, you're interacting with a physical system. And that's also another thing that's interesting when you talk about cognitive load or dexterity, that children can't tie shoelaces until a certain age just because of eye-hand coordination. And the person who invented Velcro never imagined that they would be on shoes. So this is back to the topic of innovation. When I was a child, if my shoes became untied when I was 5 and 6 years old, I had to find an adult, even a stranger on the street, and I would say, can you help me tie my shoes? And they would do that. It was totally common before Velcro on shoes. Someone decided to put Velcro on children's shoes, and it's an amazing innovation. And when you think about it, that's where innovation happens. When you look at everything from this interface design perspective, how can I make this interaction easier? And in that process, I realized that aesthetics are not the correct approach. Like trying to make something look nice as an approach is wrong. I think everything should look gorgeous. I'm not saying that design should be ugly, but what I'm saying in terms of the process, it's better to put it on later if you want to innovate. Again, my theme, I'm trying to talk about innovation. So when I was thinking about what can I do to innovate, this book came out, what was it called? The author was Malcolm Gladwell. And he wrote about this, about numeracy in the West versus Asian cultures. And it really inspired me. And then I read this other book called Hyperspace by Michio Kaku. I recommend both of these books. And Michio Kaku is a physicist, and he is researching something called string theory. Does anyone here know what string theory is? It describes reality, that it's not quantum physics, it's that everything is actually a wave. And so that everything here in our physical world isn't really physical. It's these higher dimensional waves. And as they interact with our 4 dimensions, they create, you know, like if you were to wave like a string and put a membrane on it, the points that the wave touches will look like dots. So if you're only looking at it from our dimension, all you'll see is dots. But if you have like more dimensions, you'll see that they're actually strings or waves and vibrations. And he wrote that other physicists criticized his work, saying that it's crazy, you cannot prove it, because you need, back to the original discussion, you need higher dimensional math to model this type of physics. But he would argue with people, you always do. You use higher dimensional math for time. You use 12 dimensions. You use higher dimensions for other types of physics, up to 15, 16, as many bases you need to go up in math to make the math more manageable. And I could talk about that if we have more time, but that's also something super interesting, that when you talk about base 10, the math is not very elegant. When you divide 10 in half, you get 5. And when you divide 5 in half, you get 2.5. You only have one clean, there's very limited clean divisions in base 10. And if you have base 12, you divide it by 2 is 6, and you divide 6 in half and it's 3. So it's already twice as clean. Like I'm not using the right math words, but it's a more efficient system. So the higher the base, the more efficient the math becomes. And in physics as well, if you want to understand higher dimensions, the more dimensions you have, the easier it is to describe different phenomena in our 4 dimensions, such as gravity, for example. So I was like, okay, I'm not that smart to do that, but what can I design to solve a UX problem? And that's when I went back to time, and I was thinking, okay, if everyone is learning base 10 math, people have tried a metric clock, right? Because if everyone's doing base 10 math, why shouldn't time not be base 10, right? It's a good question, right? But they tried it. I think they tested it out in Switzerland. Just people are so ingrained to using base 12 for math, no one wanted to convert to metric time. I think metric time makes sense. What do you guys think? 10 hours? 20 hours in a day? It's so much easier to calculate your timesheet at work, right? You know, like if you're getting paid 150,000 rupiah an hour and you only work 7 minutes, how much money do you get paid? The math is very difficult between base 12 of time and base 10 in your currency, correct? If your time was base 10, it would be very easy. You know what 7 minutes is. 7 minutes would be 7% of whatever your base rate is, right? It's a great idea. It's a great design. It's a great innovation. Didn't work. So I thought, okay, can I approach it a different way? So at one point, I invented a whole new math language. If anyone's interested in this, I'll send it to you. That's scalable for any base. And based on like how Japanese and Latin works, I tried to create a universal language of all the numbers. And it completely scales up. It's the most brilliant thing I've ever done. It's gotten absolutely no attention from anybody because I'm not in the math world. But my other thing that I came up with, and again, this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, was why don't we just bypass language, written language and spoken language altogether and just visually represent the time? So the test for this is when you show one of these watches to a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, they could actually read it. Adults would say it's kind of hard, but it's just totally intuitive. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And also, even if you don't know exactly the time, when you look at a digital watch or a radio dial watch, you don't really know how much time has passed. You still have to translate it into the actual experience of time. But this, you feel the visual mass increases. So even if you don't know exactly what time it is, you kind of know that 3/4 of the day is done. So it's creating a new visual language for expressing time. And it had 60 minutes for that. And I turned it into a product and a brand called NOOKA. And tying it all together, so there's a product design element, there's a UX design element, there's a deeper conceptual element. So the concept was, how do we communicate universally? And right now we're living in very dark times. We have evil, stupid people in power in so many countries. Last year you could point to 1 country or 2. This year you could probably point to 10 countries. I'm not going to name any countries. So we're moving away from this idea of universalism. But my driving philosophy, what drives me to do what I do, is to create a world where we can communicate universally. And if we need to get rid of linguistic or geopolitical or social or cultural boundaries, I think that's the only way for us to evolve as a species. And I think we all need to question things. We need to question if the math that they're teaching you in school is not real math, like base 10, you think it's real. It's kind of real, but base 15 might be more real. Euclidean geometry, this is another great example for designers. The geometry that they teach you, like when they tell you how to find the area of a circle or of a triangle, right? Do you think that that describes the world we live in? Is that real math? This is a trick question. So the thing, I'm sorry, it sounds like a math lecture. I really should, we're going to forward to design stuff. If you were to draw a triangle on a basketball, like on a curved surface, you didn't change the length of the first line. The formula that you need to calculate the area of that triangle is not the same Euclidean formula that you learned. So that means that Euclidean geometry doesn't describe the world we live in because it doesn't have formulas for things on curves, right? And but there is a geometry called Riemann. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it. It's a German mathematician in the 19th century. He came up with a geometry that explains all the shapes and all the forms on curves, flat. But why don't they teach us this at school? Because they think we're stupid, right? They think, oh my God, Euclidean geometry is hard enough. But it's not really describing the world. So you should question everything. Like even the math that you do, as soon as you question everything, and this is the problem with being a designer, right? People think that I complain too much, right, Yamaoka sensei? Everyone thinks I'm just complaining all the time. I'm not complaining. I want to make the world a better place. If I see an inefficiency or I see a problem, I think it needs to be questioned. And especially for you guys here, Indonesia and Japan are both very hierarchical societies. And there's a lot of things that you should be questioning. And you probably don't feel safe to question them outside. But while you're here in university, you really need to question deeply. You need to question everything. The very reality that you live in needs to be questioned. So back to my concept for NOOKA. The concept was universal communication. And here you could see one form that incorporates UX, UI, also product design, and also the branding. The name itself I engineered to not sound like it's English or Japanese or Scandinavian. Everyone gets a different impression on where the company's from. So it's engineered to have this truly like international feeling to it. And that's, as a designer or as an innovator, you have to think of all these different levels and parts of the project. And it wasn't just timepieces, because the concept was not about time. The concept was about universal communication. So then I started thinking, OK, like what else communicates a concept without words? And so our second product was a fragrance. And the fragrance was kind of what put us out of business, but that's another story. This is not an entrepreneurship class. But, and also we did belts that don't require instructions. So what kind of products can we develop that don't require instructions, that anyone of any age can interact with them and touch them and figure out how to use them? And that's a brand-driven design process. So who here is a product designer? OK, not that many, so we won't go too deep into that then. But one of the things is, like, people think that Apple is this design-driven company. It's not. Apple is a brand-driven company. People think Johnny Ives is this amazing designer. I'm sure he is an amazing designer. But without Steve Jobs, I don't think he could do anything as interesting as what he did when he was at Apple. It got really big for a while. Lots of different things. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Created a manifesto about universal communication. And that manifesto was used by a lot of design programs around the world. It was free to download on my website. And a lot of collaborative projects were born from that. These are some projects I did with Rem Koolhaas and some other famous designers on how to express the ethos of the brand into other different form factors. Let me fast forward. Worked into collaborations. I did 2 seasons of NOOKA designs for Fila, shoes, shirts, and bags. I also do, okay, so that's that. NOOKA's done. I also do fine arts. Who here is doing fine arts? No one? Okay, I didn't do it either. So this is it's an art project I did called the Ferry Labor Union. And it's one of the things, this is tied into circular design. One of the things you find when you talk about animal conservation, everyone like loves pandas, right? And everyone loves cats and dogs. Like they don't want to see like a abused kitten on the side of the road. Everyone's, oh my God, you're so sad. But no one really cries when they step on a caterpillar, or no one really cares about killing a fly, right? And I think that this needs to be questioned, right? So people use pesticides now. Every country, the consumption of pesticides goes up every year. The use of fertilizer goes up every year. And we're at a crisis with insects right now. Insect populations have crashed globally 70%. Can you imagine the biomass that has disappeared? And when the biomass of the insects are gone, the birds disappear. Because what do birds eat? They eat insects. So you have to think very deeply even about something as simple as squashing a fly. I don't think anyone, after this lecture, I don't want anyone to ever kill a fly. Okay? They're very important. And you have a lot of these effects, like where people said, oh, I don't like dog shit on the sidewalk. So now everyone like picks it up in a plastic bag. But who used to eat that shit before? Flies, right? So fly numbers continue to drop, and bird numbers also continue to drop. So my art project was about getting people to think about the invisible world. And fairies are invisible. So, and I made it look like an insect. So it's kind of this subliminal art project that I did, kind of fun. But again, like what's the best medium for a concept, for if you talk about saving insects, people are like, oh gosh, they don't want to hear about it. Like no one wants to hear about conservation. But if you show them a beautiful art of these really, really cute fairies flying around London and write stories about them and how sensitive they are to the environment, then I thought maybe that's a way to get people engaged. At our lab, we also do, now we're going back into what I do at Keio. The Sankara Research Lab, we approach circularity and regenerative design from a design perspective. And one project we have is called Muta. We're trying to create furniture that takes up less space and less material. Who here is doing furniture design? Yep. I saw you had a wonderful, all the chairs on the second floor, the beautiful, beautiful stuff. So we're doing that kind of project. So back to innovation. Innovation itself is not design. It's not creativity. It's not invention. Innovation is forged at the intersection of all of these things. So do you guys talk a lot about innovation in your classes here? Yeah. You do? Yeah. So like innovation, the reason I put that slide here is it's something even people in the industry really confuse all the time. They blame the designer for a failed product launch, for example. Or a company wants innovation, and they come up with something that is so off-brand that their customers don't understand it and they don't buy it. So innovation, since we don't have a lot of time, it's not invention, it's not design, it's not even imagination. It's about creating a sense of something new. You want people to feel like it's new. It doesn't have to be new. And if you keep that in your mind, then you can also go back to the past. So a lot of times people think, oh, well, we tried this 5 years ago and it didn't work. And so we're not going to do it again. We got yelled at. But maybe 5 years ago was the wrong context for the time period, right? And how does that affect? It affects all types of design and innovation. Japan is a really interesting, I'm sorry, like I always go off tangents when I do presentations. My slides are just there to give me an idea. So Japan, if you go to Japan, they don't have a lot of EVs, a lot of electric vehicles. I was very surprised to come to Indonesia and see all do you say BYD or BID? BYD. So all the BYD cars on the road, it's amazing. And when you think about why, or study why Japan doesn't have EVs, it's super interesting rabbit hole to go down. It's because Toyota and a lot of the other and the Japanese companies were investing in the hydrogen economy and using fuel cells that use hydrogen to run the engines. And they said, or they think that it's a much more efficient system and you could use the same infrastructure. You could retrofit gasoline stations that have gasoline to have liquid hydrogen and the same type of trucks to deliver them. And it's a more efficient system than, let's say, burning coal in an electrical power plant and then getting that electricity on the grid. Now, if you analyze it, it actually is a better system. The hydrogen economy actually makes more sense, right? But the rest of the world said, no, we're going to do rechargeable batteries, which are actually really bad for the environment when you think about it. They only have a return and are net positive or net zero after using them for many, many years. And that means that you have to have a consumer behavior where they're going to keep their cars for more than 10 years. So you could see you need to look at all these different moving parts to get a really good idea of the impact of a circular design and how you do innovation. Now, Japan has it's a pattern that we see repeating during the VHS wars. You guys weren't even born yet. In the 90s, Japan, Sony's corporation invented Betamax, and the Dutch company Philips invented VHS. Betamax was a better system. It had a higher resolution. It required less material. It was a more compact tape. But Sony wanted everyone to pay a licensing fee to use Betamax. And Philips made it open source. They said it's free. Which one do you think became the standard? The VHS. So it doesn't mean that the better solution always wins. Sometimes you have to look at all these different parts, the economics, the consumer behavior, where we are in time and space in the culture. So now I'm going to talk more about innovation and design. Or should I stop and do Q&A on that part? What do you guys think? Anyone have questions? Things they want to say? Anyone? Okay, then I'm just going to go through the rest of circular design and innovation. So one of the things we do is with our cement project, every year we have researchers focusing on a different waste stream and seeing if they can incorporate that into building materials. So one year we did fashion industry, and one of the problems, again, with fashion and circular design is everyone thinks that they can recycle the fibers, but you really can't, because every time you recycle fibers, they get shorter and shorter, and you need long fibers to create a thread and to make paper. The only exception is like cardboard. Cardboard is made from like a sludge, like a paper sludge. It's kind of, you can recycle that a lot. So there are, we did one year where we used denim scraps and denim fibers that were too short to recycle into paper, into cement, and see if fiber cement can be made stronger with that waste cycle. We also did another year, we did waste streams that were found on the beaches of Kanagawa. And so it's an ongoing project supported by a cement company in Japan. And that's one project we did. And also, a lot of things about building materials. Fiber cement is thinner and lighter than regular cast reinforced cement. So also the design angle from the lab is to try to find ways to make this material that is only used inside the wall to make it attractive enough to use as an exterior material. So that's kind of like a marketing spin on circular design. And but what we really believe is the most important part of design is biodesign, is using biological processes to create new materials. And that could be anything from lab-grown fibers. Lab-grown meat is going to be a big growth area coming up soon. Lab-grown fiber companies. I don't know, it looked a couple of years ago that Spiber in Japan was doing spider silk that was fermented with genetic engineering. And also, the reason I think also that biodesign is amazing is you don't have to be a biologist to do biodesign. You can read the research papers and have a problem you want to solve and use AI as a tool. And my lab at Keio, we win a lot of designs in biodesign, but we don't have a biology lab or a chemistry lab. And I have 3 KMD students here. Are you a biologist? No. Gyoka, are you a biologist? So you don't need to be a biologist. I don't want anyone to be afraid of biodesign. Anyone can do biodesign. And I noticed that you have 3D printers and stuff, but I think the standard lab equipment eventually is going to be CRISPR, like DNA sequencing devices, and lots of culturing yeast and various biomanufacturing methods. So one of the projects that we did this was last year, right? Not this year. It was called RISO, and that was connected to our circular design process with waste streams and a specific seaweed called sargassum that's an invasive species in most countries, but in Japan it's a native species. So I don't know if I have the video for this. Yeah, I have a video I can show later if we have time. And what we did at the lab, what the students did, is created fibers from the seaweed and ways to turn the seaweed into a 3D printable filament, into something that could be woven on a loom, or other types of manufacturing processes from the seaweed itself. And that won the Terra Prize at the International Biodesign Challenge. Our first prize that we won was 2022 was see, this is also what's interesting about language. At the time was called circular design, but this project is probably really what would be called regenerative design. So circular design is, the idea of circular design is that you don't have to recycle. So if anyone tells you it's like you want to design recyclability into the product, that's not circular. That's what we have now. Circular design is that the life cycle of every part of what you're designing as a product designer can be reused with limited carbon footprint. Or regenerative design is when you leave the environment at net zero for carbon footprint and toxicity, or you actually improve the environment. So the simplest regenerative systems are if you grow like corn or grain and beans and squash together, the beans fix the nitrogen into the soil. So you have the grains pull the nitrogen out, but the beans fix nitrogen back in, so you don't need to add fertilizer. And that's what's now being called a regenerative system and regenerative design. And so thinking about that for other products, like can this bottle be regenerative? Can this table be regenerative? It's a real big challenge. But this was one project that we did, totally speculative. We didn't build this. The other projects we prototyped is a off-the-grid vending machine that, let's say if you had a beehive in the top and the extra honey would drip down into a fermentation tank, and then the gas that it gives off would go into a biofuel cell and generate the electricity to then turn the wax and the honey into a product that the vending machine could then sell. So it doesn't need to be connected to the electrical grid. All of the systems were vetted by various engineers and was plausible, and we came up with different ideas for regenerative biodesign vending machine. And if all of these have great videos online that I could share later. And the system for this was really quite interesting. Our Vlor project also traveled all over the place. It's to create usable chemistry from kitchen waste, and we prototyped this. Also, it's regenerative design. So the garbage is not just being recycled or upcycled, but it's creating a higher value product as the end product. And then at the end, you don't have any waste. So that was kind of fun as well. And then also biodesign and regenerative design. One of our graduates who's now a researcher is working a lot on the ChromaLife project, which is bio ink. And who here is doing textiles? Anyone? Well, the biggest problem with textiles is that the natural dyes, there are lots of natural dyes, but they're not color fast. Like they fade with UV exposure, they fade when you wash them. So trying to find, if you're wearing blue jeans and natural indigo dyeing is a blue that is color fast because of a biological process. Does anyone know that how indigo dye is made? Anyone ever see it? So it's fermented, like yogurt. So the fermentation has a particular bacteria, just like you have a special bacteria or yeast for tempeh, there's a special bacteria for indigo dye. And what the bacteria in the indigo dye, it creates chemistry that makes it color fast. If it's not done naturally, the chemistry to make other dyes color fast is extremely toxic, and it pollutes the waterways and the fish that you eat. So to come up with similar color fast dyes from nature is going to require a lot of research and experimentation. Right now, they only have a reliable process that we've had for thousands of years with indigo. So that's also very important. That affects, could we have bio-inks eventually for printmaking or for painting or for pigments? And that's something that you could apply biodesign to any project. And what I would like everyone to come away with is that designers do not need to be scientists. We all now have so much knowledge at our fingertips with AI, or even without AI, you can come up with all these kind of ideas. And also to look at the world differently. Like, everyone has this idea that everything has been discovered, but it hasn't. Like maybe one of you are going to go home and pick up an old book and see a bright red stain from the insect pooing in it or something, and you're going to, oh, wait a minute, this is a really nice red, and you might find a new insect. Red dyes already come from insects, cochineal beetles, but maybe there are colors that we don't have that we need to work on. We don't have greens that are color fast. We don't have really good oranges and purples. So maybe you'll find something just by observing and testing. So I think I can tell when I've spoken too much when I start losing my voice. So. I did want to talk a little bit more about innovation. Am I boring you guys yet, or should I continue talking? More talking? Okay. So one of the things when I give talks, people are still very anxious about AI. Is anyone anxious about AI? Yeah? People are raising their hands. Okay, so I want to make everyone excited about AI. I'm going to be honest. It's going to be really rough. I think for a couple of years, all big companies are going to think, well, we don't need to hire people because we could have AI do it. But at the moment, AI is quite stupid. So at one point, they're going to realize, the business is going to realize that, and it's already happening. They're starting to hire people again because they realize that AI can't really do what they think it can do. But eventually, it will do what they think it can do, and then we're going to have a second disruption where the whole idea of modern work is going to be destroyed. And I know I told you, I want you to get optimistic. I know that sounds negative, but destruction is not a bad thing, because destruction creates a space for new ideas and new ways of living, and that goes back to questioning everything. So the systems that will be disrupted with AI are going to be mostly financial, because if you work and you get paid in a currency, but there aren't any jobs, but there is value being created, then how do you represent currency? And when people, right now, a lot of economists and politicians, they're saying, we can't get rid of money, we can't have a new system, we've had this system forever. It's absolutely not true. The modern financial system is a post-World War II invention, okay? And you probably have communities, even in Indonesia, that are off-grid and don't use money at all. And those people are probably just as happy and just as productive as someone living in Jakarta. So this idea that everyone needs to work and have money, this idea is going to be challenged by AI. So I made a couple of slides to show how disruption affects society that you might not have thought of. Okay, interactive part. What is this on the left? Painting. What kind of painting? Landscape painting. What do we have on the right? A landscape photo, right? So in the 19th century, right, if you were doing real estate or trying to do business overseas, you actually traveled with a landscape artist. They had their paints and their easel and their canvases, And if you wanted to discover a new area, you had to bring a landscape artist with you because it needed to be accurate. It had to be an accurate representation. So landscape painting was an actual skill, and it was a career. People went to school to be landscape painters, landscape artists. People also went to school to be portrait artists. Like if you wanted, you know, the way you look and framed in your house, you had to hire a portrait artist, and they had to be accurate. And the more photorealistic it was, the higher value it was perceived, right? So when photography came to be, if you want to research old newspaper articles, it's very similar. If you replace the word photography with AI, you get the exact same arguments, that people were saying how photography is an evil and it's not a good thing, and that it's, people were saying it's, that it was that photography was like really bad. And photography was really bad for the landscape painter and the portrait painter. So it's not that landscape painting and portrait painting went away, it's just that with the advent of photography, the value of portrait painting and the value of landscape painting went down. You couldn't make a predictable income like you could before photography. So the disruption of photography to people who were working in the arts was real, but it wasn't that it made the painters disappear, it just made it less valued. Like right now, if you wanted to paint landscapes, it's a hobby, it's not a career. It used to be a career. So you need to think about this kind of modeling when you think about how future technology is going to affect things, right? But does anyone see where I'm going? What was the thing that came out of this disruption that was amazing? Does anyone have an idea? What do we have post-photography that we didn't have pre-photography? I want all the art students to come up with an answer for me. Yep. Movies, well, that was using photographs. What else? Yes?
Maybe art came from different form, and not only portraits and landscapes, and people try to experiment with
Exactly. It made art very experimental. Photography didn't kill art, but it created space for abstraction to be born. If it wasn't for, you could not have Picasso or Murakami if we didn't have that disruption with photography. Of course, this is just a hypothesis. But if you look pre-photography and post-photography, you see this explosion of new expressions of art. So the disruption was real. It had a real economic effect, just like the car had an economic effect on people that raised horses and took care of horses, right? But photography was a technology that really changed society. And this is what our challenge is as educators and students, is to see, okay, what is this disruption of AI going to create? What is this space going to give us? And the digital revolution is another parallel with how, well, let's skip that. Yeah, so anyway, I'm going to stop there because I put too many slides there. So that's my little speech about disruption. And now we're going to have Q&A. Yeah, I'm done, I think. Yeah. Oh my God, I went more than a half hour. Yeah. We have two, and you have a mic here too.
Yeah, I was already old, and actually
I'm also old.
Yes, yeah, but I'm 77.
Oh,
87.
Wow,
So,
that's a little older than me.
yes. I was actually got a class with got education on design by Victor Papanek.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, in Denmark. Yeah. Well, seeing your presentations, it reminds me you with Victor Papanek.
Oh, that's a wonderful association. I'll take it. Thank you.
Yes, But my question is actually related to national. You see, I'm afraid that if design is going to a part of industry, well, what I'm going to say is like this. You see, my first experience in design is industrial design.
Mm-hmm.
So industrial is number one, is the aim of education in industrialization.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened then, if you go too far away into the design, nowadays change into a digital product, make by a digital with and artificial intelligence. Then everything you get, first of all, we change our mind instead of using our body,
Mm-hmm.
tactile, and qualia, you see, into language.
Mm-hmm.
Into language, and this is a different one. You see, what I want to clarify that that design is related with qualia, not only with quanta.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean is quanta is also mathematics, science, and so forth. You see, so we still need qualia. See, so in that case, when you talk about artificial intelligence, I still, design still belongs to aesthetic, belongs to art circle.
Well, that's a very active dilemma in design schools and design as an
Yes.
industry all the time,
Yes.
is the role of aesthetics, right?
Yeah.
But aesthetics, they change. So when you actually analyze the aesthetics, it's often curated, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's when someone says, this is good design. Like you have one of the reasons why, the awards, we do award shows, and I know that they're very important for people, for their resumes and students to get jobs, but they're also the role of the curator, like having judges and deciding what is good design. The idea of aesthetics is quite elitist. It's not very democratic in a way. And so I think there's a role of aesthetics. I think if you're talking about qualia and quanta, but if the qualitative parts have an actual value to the end user, then it can be quantified. So I don't think that the demarcation between qualia and quanta, I think that's like a very old way of looking at design. And I think that for example, when you try to do high design for segments of the culture or of people that aren't educated in the aesthetics, then they don't understand it and you don't have the same reaction to it. So the balance of it is always a challenge. And I think AI is just going to create new challenges for aesthetics. Like people might think, well, you remember in the 90s, digital typography became the thing, right? And so people stopped kerning their type. People weren't paying attention to letter spacing and kerning. But the end user, like someone now, they don't care. So if the end user doesn't care and they don't know about the aesthetics of the typography, the value just is gone. Could you spend your time more on the concept and less on the execution? But the balance is really important. So I'm not saying to throw aesthetics out the window. I'm just saying that it's so tied to culture that you have to also question it and see how is it going to be used. And I do believe you should be able to quantify it. You should be able to say that I use this aesthetic to get this effect, like this emotional effect or this type of user. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, Prof. Imam. So we will move to the Q&A session.
Yep.
And for all participants, audiences in the room, if you would like to ask a question, you can please raise your hand and kindly introduce yourself and starting with your name and affiliation. So which one do you? Oh, okay.
Good day, Professor Waldman. So my name is Nuno. I'm an alumni, okay, from ITB Design. So thank you so much, okay, for sharing your valuable knowledge. So I'm thinking, okay, well, current generative AI models are exceptionally capable of producing design outputs. Yet, okay, well, they rarely account, okay, for material life cycles, cultural sustainability, or long-term societal impact. So, well, my questions, I would like, okay, to hear, okay, from your perspective. You foresee the emergence of AI system capable of evaluating design proposals simultaneously through environmental, economic, cultural, and ethical dimensions, thereby functioning as genuine partners in circular innovation rather than merely tools for content generation? Please share your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Great question. It also ties into the first question. I do believe, I think the problem with using AI as it is now is a lot of students and general public are not educated as to how to best use it. So what you're describing, like coming up with a impact, like basically do an impact study for a product or evaluate an aesthetics, I think eventually it is going to be very good at it. I think right now you could get it to generate a really good impact study. But if we're focusing, of course, the talk was supposed to be on circular design, and I hope there was enough of that in there. But one of the problems with circular design and regenerative design is that, and this is done on purpose by governments, in the industry, what we call blame shifting. Like trying to say, oh, well, it's the designer's responsibility, or it's the consumer's responsibility. Like a lot of people work on programs that they want to change consumer behavior. So a little bit of a tangent for that right now with greenhouse gases, with GHGs. If everyone stopped eating beef, we would cut down GHGs by between 20 and 30%. Now, is that something that you could do with behavior change? Or even if you were to get the information from an LLM, from AI, to add to your hamburger menu on the impacts, and I don't think that alone is going to change the behavior. So, but I do think the AI is going to give the designer the tool. But even if the designer has that information, you know, the designer is not a scientist. They're not a biologist. They probably don't know like the physics. So, is that information going to be usable? Like, too much information can also be a distraction. So, the answer is yes and no. Yeah.
Or in furthermore, we need to also concerns about the policy and ecosystem at the same time.
Yeah, I think, well, also the danger at the moment is like governments now are taking control of the LLMs, and to be able to question, are you getting a correct assessment, is you still need genuinely good research tools in order to be able to keep the AI in check and also to train it. Like one of the great tools that you could use as a designer, some of the services allow you to build your own library. So you could tell it to do an analysis based on the library that you yourself uploaded. So then it's a very powerful tool. So it's, the question's really big. So I think like to attack it, we'd have to attack all the little parts. But it's, I think eventually AI, because right now it's not AI. Right now it's LLM. Everyone knows that, right? AI is not artificial intelligence. It's large language models. It's just finding patterns. But to answer the second part of your question, I think eventually there will be AI that could do evaluations. And like even with aesthetics, like if it has enough data in it about like, you know, what's the most popular painting at the museums and on different cultural levels, and they can come up with a qualitative assessment as well, I think.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome to choose from.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Prof. Waldman. I'm Zen from Jepara. I'm the graduate student at FSRD. And I am not satisfied with your explanation about the circular design yet, because now I'm conducting the research entitled Circular Design with wood culture, because I try to border my research area in the culture, because I come from Japan. I know that the circular design is like the new religion, yeah? It's when we want to go through the circular design field, we must, it must be in line with our mind, because when we follow the several tool or several principle that apply with the circular design, so we must form the people. We must change the system as well. And I know that Jepara is the biggest cluster in the world, especially in the furniture and wood carving. And I like your opinion or your insight. If Jepara could be the international cluster for circular design in furniture and woodcraft. So what is the priority that you must first change? Product, the first, and the business system, or the institutional level? Thank you.
Okay, so another complicated question. I'm going to give, so wood, furniture, and paper as an industry scientifically is inherently circular, right? So if you recycle the wood or mulch it, it's the growing of trees sequesters CO2, and if you're not making like particle board, that's hard to recycle or upcycle. If you're incorporating a lot of circular design processes, like for example, MDF board right now that we have here, this is MDF, is not really circular because it's very difficult to recycle because it has a lot of toxic resins in making it. So to answer the question is it has to be on every level. But you can't control, if you're shipping the furniture to another country, you don't know how the impact of the recycling of that furniture is in that environment. So the circularity, you have to own and control what you can control. Now, a good example, we could talk more about wood and forestry management, is cotton. So like cotton is 100% organic, it's a plant, it's a really good fiber, and it's circular if you don't mix it with a synthetic fiber. So as soon as you have polycotton blend, you can't recycle the fabric. But if you have 100% cotton clothing, it's 100% recyclable, upcyclable. You can make it into paper, you can make it into, it's not toxic. But why is cotton a circular design issue? Why are people trying to genetically engineer cotton? Does anyone know the answer? Why is cotton an environmental issue? Comes up a lot in circular design discussions. Use of water, water usage. They're growing cotton in parts of the world where the water could be better used to support healthy human communities. So you're diverting the water from human use and livestock use to growing cotton, and that's because cotton requires a lot of sunlight, right? Now, cotton used to be grown mostly in the south of the US, which gets a lot of rain. So it's not an environmental issue to grow cotton in the south of the US. It's not an environmental issue to grow cotton in Bangladesh, for example, that has a whole monsoon with the weather. So when you look at it as a circular design problem, it's a circular design problem only for cotton that's grown in areas where the water is being poorly managed. Now, with furniture, you have the same issue where Indonesia and Malaysia have a very bad reputation for forest management. So someone who wants to import the furniture might question if the forest is being managed correctly, And that's an environmental issue and not necessarily a circular design issue. So again, back to language. It's like if you're focusing on the circularity, you have to try to ensure that the furniture at the end of its life cycle is not going to be causing problems where it's being used. And it's a complicated issue. I mean, and that's why there's a lot of blame shifting where people are saying, well, it's the local government or it's the federal government, but it's quite complicated. So I don't think I answered your question, but I did answer it and not answered at the same time. Mm-hmm.
Most artisans already implemented the circular principle.
Hey, you can turn I think it goes on.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And I think that Jepara has, maybe it's not full, it's not in the closing loop, but
Mhm.
I think several clusters that widespread from the north to the south.
Mhm.
Jepara, for example, like the garden furniture.
Mhm.
Usually that the small medium enterprise receive the order is by the driven buyer.
Mhm.
So sometimes the buyer has power to, for example, like to make a knockdown or modular product. So I think that it's already practiced by the Jepara small scale producer. For example, like in the another, for example, it's in the 3D relief carving centra. They already do because they already use like the small traditional wood joint to make this like the knockdown. So, for example, like the gebyok, the 3D relief carving. It's already implemented, but I'm still confused why the circular design is still being a big issue for the furniture.
Well, I think it's a big issue because of the issues we brought up. Like the consumer is going to want to know if the forest is being managed properly and meets an international circular design standard, like closed loop manufacturing, then it's a communication problem. It's not a problem of circular design. And then also these things are very buzzwordy. Like, now everyone's using the word regenerative design. Like circular design is now, is it regenerative design? So it's a lot of times it becomes a communication issue. Like, for example, another good example is leather, for example, right? Leather is animal skin. And vegans and vegetarians, they don't want to use leather because they don't want to harm animals. But they don't think about like a nylon or a synthetic fiber garment is far more harmful to animals than the leather is. The leather is regenerative. It'll biodegrade. It lasts longer. So the communication issues with circular design is also something that you have to really think about. So it might just be a communication issue as well. But it's a good question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's have applause for everyone. Yeah.
Right. Let's move to next question.
Yeah. The guy in the back with the blue shirt raised his hand earlier.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if he still has a question.
Yeah, so to allow more participants to engage in Q&A session, and we kindly ask everyone to, for each question, to be give brief and concise. So yeah. Okay, please.
Thank you, Professor Matthew. It was an excellent presentation, and I have two questions.
You really have to put the mic in front of your mouth. Yeah.
Okay. I have two questions.
Okay.
Question number one. Professor mentioned this that we can recycle everything even this table, especially in the case of beans. For example, beans during the recyclability, it will be no need the nutrition anymore, and it can be recyclable. I would like to know the method or the process which one professor can using. My second question, why the bacteria thrive can on the dirty place, but it cannot be grow up easily on the clean place? Two questions.
Okay, what's the second question?
Why the bacteria can grow up easily on the dirty surface, but it cannot be grow up on the clean surface?
Oh, okay. Well, about recyclability, that, again, I can't answer that question as a general question because everything is particular to the material that's used. So if furniture is made with wood joints and organic glue and natural lacquer, then it can be turned into paper, it can be built into something else, it can biodegrade. But like MDF uses a lot of polymers in the resins and is impossible to recycle. So planning the recycling plan for a product is a very important thing of the designer, and there's no single answer for that. In terms of bacteria, again, finding bacteria to do specific jobs is not impossible. So if they need dirty surfaces or clean surfaces, they could figure out ways. There's this thing called a bioreactor where you recreate the natural environment for a bacteria or a yeast or a microscopic organism to live, and trial and error, and you should be able to figure out a way to grow it. A good example that I had in the slide I fast forwarded, penicillin, which created the revolution of antibiotics, was incredibly difficult to grow and to cultivate. And it's tied to Bandung. You have a street named after Louis Pasteur, right? Right? So he invented penicillin. But it took almost 80 years for penicillin to be commercialized. He invented it and showed that it could work, but it was so laborious and so sensitive to grow in numbers. It took, what was the name, the scientist in the US? It took about 40 years to create an industrial process for it. So you have to attack each problem differently. So bacteria, if you work on it, eventually, if you're interested, read about the development of penicillin. It's quite interesting. That would answer your question better than I could.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I will do. Thank you, sir.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay. Can you please handle the microphone to? Okay.
Hello, I'm Dita. I'm from Idea Cultura. It's creative agency in Bandung. So I want to ask about the circular design. Is it applicable to the digital product?
Yes, great question.
Mostly my work output is digital product, and how to apply it in the process of the production.
Absolutely, great question. So when we talk about, people talk about, when I talked earlier about EVs, electric vehicles, and Toyota was saying they're not that efficient when you look at all of the variables and that hydrogen is more efficient. The same thing about, you might have some apps that you run on your phone that you feel the battery gets really, really hot because it's, if you don't optimize an app for processing, like you don't optimize the efficiency of how it uses the processor, it's using more electricity. And the electricity that you use, depending on where you are, has a different environmental impact. And as a designer, you probably should be aware of, is this design optimized for the processor it's going to be used on? Now, as a designer, that might not be your responsibility. You might want to work with a programmer for that. But that's something that can be quantified. About an interesting example I like to give for this question is, and I'm going to ask you this question. Per capita, which city do you think has a lower carbon footprint, Tokyo or New York? Tokyo. Who thinks Tokyo? So everyone thinks it's Tokyo. It's New York City. New York City has a much lower carbon footprint than Tokyo. Now, the reason that is after the Fukushima earthquake, Japan took its nuclear power plants offline. So a lot of the electricity in Japan shift from nuclear to coal-powered. And the carbon footprint of a person living in Tokyo, I don't know, doubled or tripled, right? And New York has a higher population density than Tokyo. So you have this efficiency of living in taller buildings. You use hardly a single family versus a tall building. The energy that takes to heat it or cool it is not that different, really. So the higher population density, the lower the carbon footprint. So the same thing with your apps and your UX design. You have to think, okay, where is it being used? Does Android have a more efficient processor than the laptop, for example? And then the chips that are being used, where are they being made, right? And are the rare earths being used in the NVIDIA chip being sourced from a mine in China that's polluting the Pacific Ocean? Or is it being sourced from a mine in Australia that's not polluting? So it's mind-boggling. Like the variables of a UX design are almost the same as a physical product design, because you have to, the physical product of the phone and the computer is very real, right? And you have to think about that. Of course, there's an efficiency because your app is not the only thing on that device. You know, so you can't take 100% of the carbon footprint of the iPhone for an app that's only being used 7% of the time, but you can do complicated math to figure out what the carbon footprint is for that UX. It can be done, it's just complicated.
Thank you.
Okay, we still have time. Professor, is that fine to
as long as I have water, I'm fine.
Okay. Okay, so keep the water. Yeah. Okay, please. Yeah. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Pita. I'm a student in ITB. So it's not really a question about circular design, I'm sorry. It's more of questions because, Professor, you said that photos made art very experimental. What do you think about the future of the art itself? Like, can AI make art more experimental than it is right now? Because if all of this photo is disrupting the art industry, and we got arts and crafts movement, we got Art Nouveau, we got Art Deco, and something like that. Mm-hmm. In your perspective, what kind of art can you see in the future, and how can the art itself becoming more experimental affecting the design industry itself, as art and design have a very strong connection? That's all.
Okay, also, all your questions are super big and deep, so that's a great question. At the moment, I don't think AI can create a new art movement. I just don't think it's doing anything creative. I think that the certain aesthetic of the AI hallucination, like when AI was young and it didn't learn the rules and it would put like 7 fingers on one hand and 3 fingers on the other hand, you could say that that was a new aesthetic, and it was, but I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be a movement. Certainly, if you look at a lot of art now, it has become this, what they call hyperpop, which is very influenced by AI. So I think AI could certainly influence a certain art aesthetic. And just as you have in academia a lot of papers that are totally written by AI, and it's going to be very hard to tell which are written by AI or not, I think that you will have art. You will have AI-generated art. I don't think it's going to come up with a new movement. Eventually, maybe, yes, but I think I think when photography disrupted the traditional arts, I don't think anyone imagined Picasso. I don't think you could have imagined it at the time. I think it had to evolve from, it created this a sense of freedom, and people wanted something new. So I think AI is going to allow that type of social process to happen, but I don't think it's going to lead any of the processes. Yeah. But thank you for the great question.
Right. Okay, the next question. Okay, sure.
Good afternoon, Professor Waldman. Thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah, and I'm a game designer, graphic designer, a lot of digital media design stuff. So you can imagine I probably haven't had that much friction with circular design, but I think there's one thing that I can say kind of connects it is the idea of like this very prominent consumer behavior of convenience. So for example, in digital marketing especially, short form videos for marketing is just like a lot of shorter and more engagement baiting when it comes to marketing that kind of also impacts the way people behave outside of shopping. There's a little bit of a moral dilemma there because we want to sell, so we want to make everything easily digestible, very convenient for consumers, but it also affects their behavior somewhere else. And I believe when it comes to circular design, for example, with NOOKA that you have presented, some of the products didn't become popular, perhaps because it's not convenient enough for a lot of consumers. So I would like to ask if there are any interesting frictions you've had with this sort of problem where the larger consumer base always just wants something more convenient despite the better effects of certain products, or and if there are any solutions to it, or are we just in the mercy of convenience from the consumers? Thank you very much.
Let's deconstruct the question backwards. Are there solutions? Absolutely. I think that when we look at connecting it to every other question before that, to circularity, and with UX design, and everyone's talking about AI, and the data centers, they're taking up so much electricity. And because electricity in so much of the world is generated by burning coal, it's very, very bad for the environment. So everyone's saying no data centers, no AI, no chip makers, right? But why aren't there more people saying, wait a minute, let's accelerate regenerative energy. Let's have more solar. Let's have more wind. Let's have more geothermal. That is also a solution. One solution is saying, no, we're not going to build the data center. But the other solution is like, okay, let's build a data center that is purely self-powered. So in Japan, and this might not seem related, but it is, they make everyone separate the garbage. Like you get shamed if you don't separate all your plastic bottles. But they only recycle 16% of what they make everyone separate. And the rest of it, they're still burning, right? But, so if you look at just that part of the story, you think, okay, well, that's kind of fascist to make people separate garbage and not recycle it, right? So there's a social and cultural part of it. But then if you stop there and you say, well, they're burning the garbage anyway, I'm not going to separate it, right? That's another reaction. But when you dig deeper and you visit, and they allow you to visit these the garbage treatment plants, the garbage treatment plants are net positive in energy generation. So they burn this excess plastic, but they generate all the electricity to run the whole power plant, and it's so efficient that they put electricity back into the grid. So as long as burning it and you have right filters and you're not polluting the environment, you have a very analog system that somehow is becoming part of a regenerative system. So there's always a solution. So the challenge as a designer is to come up with the solutions. Like right now, the problem with fast fashion, and I'm guilty, I'm wearing, this is Shein, this is like, 700 yen shipped from China. This is Muji. And back to your question about circular design. Circular design is not just one process. Like if the life cycle of the product, like if I keep this shirt until I die and I give it to my son and he wears it, even if it's poly cotton, it's very circular, because it's not entering a waste stream. So that's a behavior, right? So how the problem with fast fashion is because it's so inexpensive, people don't treat the garments with the same care that they would something that they buy at Prada or Dior, which they spent thousands of dollars for. So that's the economics of it, right? So you could see examples within any industry of how there's consumer behavior that is dictated by celebrity culture and curatorial voices and a certain, but then other things that are dictated purely by price. So back to like consumer behavior, a good example, and this is an example I give in my circular design class, is in the US, smoking cigarettes was directly related to lung cancer. So they had a huge years, decades of designing campaigns to make people not smoke, and every country has grappled with this in their own way, like showing posters of lung cancer or someone like walking around with an oxygen machine, right? But you go to Japan and people still smoke, right? So you have to ask, and in the US, there's a wonderful book you could read, it's called Thank You for Smoking. And it was about the campaign to try to change consumer behavior about cigarettes. Nothing worked. If you analyzed any of the campaigns, even the campaigns, I don't know about Indonesia, but you go to Australia or the UK and they have all these, like, a third of the package has to have a picture of like someone's rotten lungs or a premature baby. It doesn't work. The only thing that worked, the reason that the smoking rates went down so low in the US is because they raised the prices, they raised the taxes. A pack of cigarettes in New York is now $18 US. It's very expensive. A pack of cigarettes in Japan is what, 400 yen, 600 yen, right? But then you have to also ask yourself, like, why was this such a problem in the US but not a problem in Japan? In Japan, smoking is not connected to lung cancer. So again, I'm not giving conspiracy theories. Everyone do your own research. But Japan is a population that has naturally very high vitamin D levels because they eat a lot of mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms and food that is naturally high in vitamin D. In the US and Northern Europe, the population is vitamin D deficient. So people who are vitamin D deficient are more prone to lung cancer. Now, they didn't know this back then. They thought it was that so yes, smoking cigarettes, if you have low vitamin D levels, can cause lung cancer. Japan didn't have the same pressure. They didn't have hospitals filled with smokers with lung cancer. There's lung cancer in Japan, don't get me wrong, but the rates are much lower than in the US. So you have to look at all these variables about how do you changing consumer behavior is really complicated. That's what I wanted to say, but I went off on with 3 different tangents. I apologize. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Professor, for such a great presentation. My name is Umer, and I'm international student in ITB, doing my master in mechanical engineering. So engineers are always innovative and they do design products for the real life problems. So my question is a little bit technical. As you design many products and now it's in the market, so designing is not as easy as we think, because after designing you have to multiple steps for the material selection, manufacturing, cost problems and safety problems. So what are the most challenging steps for the designer, according to your thoughts and your aspect, to design a product for the real life problems?
Well, I think the biggest problem for the designer is exactly what you said. The designer doesn't control what happens after the product is made. So, but the designer gets blamed when the product fails. So it's a very bad position to be in. So I'll give you a real example that I had recently. I designed a line of shoes for a Japanese company. Now this Japanese company was all OEM. They never had their own brand. They only made shoes for other brands, but they wanted to do their own brand. So they hired, not me as a professor, me as a designer, to design a line of shoes, come up with the brand and everything. And I did that for them. And I explained to them before what they needed to do. Like you started mentioning some of the steps, but the other steps for marketing is like PR, for example. Now, this is a small factory in Nara in Japan. And after the design and the prototyping, and they were using one of their factories in China to do the prototypes, they were trying to get pre-orders online and they weren't getting any pre-orders, and they said, well, the design's not working. And I'm like, the design's not working? I'm like, I need you to send me 50 pairs of the shoe in this size for us to send to all the fashion magazines in Tokyo and New York and London so that they will write about it. And they were like, oh, well, who's going to pay for those samples? And I was like, you are going to pay for those samples. It is your product. And they were like, oh, well, usually when we send samples, we make the client buy it. So Japan is a very peculiar culture, commercial culture. And I'm like, the rest of the world, no. You have to send the samples to the journalist, and it has to be their size, because if they like it, they're going to wear it, and that's a good thing. And they were like, oh, no, no, they're not going to send it back? And I was like, they might send it back, but you would like it better if they actually wanted it enough to keep it. Now, it wasn't in my presentation. Before I did interactive design, I worked in fashion. I was associate art director at some fashion magazines in New York. And when we got shoes for the photo shoot, if I called up the company and said, oh, because they always ask you to send it back. And I said, is it okay, they're my size, can I keep them? I really like them. They said, absolutely, please keep them. So the project in Japan that I did for this manufacturer stopped because they didn't want to invest in PR. They did, even though it was you need to send samples if you want to sell product. You have to do a certain amount to spend. And if you don't calculate all that, and then you turn around and you blame the designer, it's like, well, we designed the shoe and we have a website and no one's ordering it. Then your reputation as a designer could be, it puts you in a bad position, right? So yeah, being a designer is very difficult.
It means like it is necessary for a designer that he must have some background knowledge about material, like little bit about engineering. It's like a teamwork, like the designing and the innovation is like a teamwork, or it is like not, it is independently can be done.
I think it's difficult because but this is what I teach my students is if you want to survive as a designer now, you have to become knowledgeable about material science. I think that especially if there's a requirement for circular design, because if you're here in Indonesia and you're producing a product and you want to ship it to Europe, you need to be able to analyze what is the EU's Green Deal's requirement for this material, right? And it's not easy, but if you don't have enough money, there are companies, consulting companies that do the material analysis for you. And you might need a certificate from them anyway. But if you don't know what they're talking about, how are you going to utilize the material most efficiently? So I'm not saying that you have to become a material scientist or a chemist, but you need to get familiar with what the terms are. So we didn't even talk about that in this lecture, but you have bio-derived materials, you have biodegradable materials. They're two different things. So like polyurethane, like the soles of these shoes are polyurethane. It used to be that soles of shoes were made out of rubber, but back to the question in the back about consumer behavior and like fast fashion, rubber-soled shoes, rubber oxidizes eventually, it falls apart. So in the 70s and 80s, when I was a kid and when you were younger, we used to bring our shoes and our sneakers to the shoe shop and they would put new soles on it. So that's a consumer behavior and an auxiliary business. So creating a polyurethane, people are working on bio-derived polyurethane. So even if you made a bio-derived polymer, once you make it into polyurethane, it's not biodegradable. It's not a biologic, it's an organic molecule, but it's not something that fits into an environmentally friendly process. Now, why should we expect designers and consumers to be that articulate with the vocabulary of like organic chemistry? I don't think it's realistic. So I'm kind of saying yes and no again. Like, I think designers should know about materials, but I don't think it's realistic for them to be particularly expert at it.
Thank you, Professor, for such a good, great answer.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got some last question. Maybe anyone else? Bu Tita mau?
Okay, so thank you, Professor. My name is Nisa. My background is from visual communication and design. So circular design is new for me, and I want to ask you to know deeper understanding in this field. So I think first question is, I think more of your experience in conducting circular design is, when you make a circular design, is it usually traced back to the innovation of the materials, or you want to address the current problems that is existing? So maybe if you want, do you actually usually start from the material first or from the problem first?
Excellent question. You, as a designer, you should always start from the context of where the product is going to be used, or with the visual design where it's going to be seen. So just like with the cotton, cotton's not a bad material to use for fashion, but if it's Egyptian cotton, it is, right? So again, it's a question where there's not an easy answer other than saying, like, you need to focus on the context, right? And back to like circular design and visual design, it's related as well when you think about, so circular design is, you want to use the least amount of material possible, lowest carbon footprint, lowest impact on the environment, not polluting water, not creating toxic residue for people. Can it be recycled or upcycled? Is it biodegradable? So because it's there's so many variables, like the other variable we talked about a little bit is life cycle. So if you create something that's never going to be thrown away, even if it's totally toxic and not biological, like if this table here is going to be used forever, for 100 years, then it's circular, because it's, you know, it's had a very divided by time. So it's like, it's not an easy circular design. It's a big concept to get, but you have to think of life cycle as well as impacts. So that's why the context is really, really important. So with, you know, when people talk about, we were talking about furniture, and wood and paper is inherently circular if it's approached correctly, and especially if a book is kept forever, like in a library, you know, then you have very, very low impact. So there are lots of ways to, but the context is really important. So like if it's a fashion item that's going to be worn in 1 year and thrown away, and not just worn 1 year, like microplastics from synthetic fibers is a huge issue, and that comes from the washing. And so like synthetic fibers, I think when you go back to also policy and not just the designer, I think in your lifetime you're going to see synthetic fibers be illegal. I think it's just, there's no way to avoid microplastics with synthetic fibers. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think it also answers my initially second questions, because I was about to ask that the circular design always create an alternative to like change the current one, or it can like processing the current materials that is already available.
I think that's where the innovation has to come from. Like, so for example, like synthetic fibers are really important. Like if you had to go to purely natural organic fibers, you probably couldn't grow enough silkworms to supply the world population with silk, or silk-derived fiber, right? So even though something is biological and biodegradable, if you think about, okay, well now we're going to switch to silk, well, do we have enough mulberry trees? And when silk was more popular, the global population was probably 1/10 of what it is now. So there has to be solutions. So but silk is biodegradable, and it's also non-bioactive. It's a very amazing fiber. So the solution would be, okay, how can the invention of synthetic fiber, where they were trying to recreate silk through chemistry, and they came up with polyester, nylon first and then polyester. That's also really interesting if anyone wants to study the history of synthetic fibers. Also very much the last 100-year technology. But if we can come up with a way to, using biomanufacturing to create silk-like fibers, then yeah, there's a solution. There has to be a circular design or regenerative design solution for everything. There's no reason for them not. It's just a matter of will and economic support, in my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Okay, that was the last question. So, Professor, would you like to share some final statement or to conclude your public lecture today?
The one thing that AI has made it so easy, a lot of the questions were about responsibility and blame shifting, like should designers have this responsibility or the manufacturer, or does it need to be regulated? If you learn how to do prompts that keep your, if you want to do deep research, like if you just learn like really simple rules, like say, I only reference academic papers, or don't reference academic papers, only reference contrarians. What's happening in betting markets? Like if you go down enough deep rabbit holes and you ask the right questions, it makes it much easier. I think that could support the innovation, but the innovation has to come from you. You're going to need to interpret the information, and that's why designers moving forward used to be, when we were talking about quanta, you had to have real measurable skills. Like when I started out in graphic design, I had to know how to work a darkroom because we didn't have computers. If I wanted a logo to be bigger, I actually had to go to a darkroom and use a stat camera and make the logo bigger. And I had to develop the paper myself. So there were a lot of skills necessary. And now computers and AI has made entry level to, like, you don't need skills at all. You just need ideas. And I think that's a great thing. But you need to have a lot of knowledge in lots of different areas. You need to start becoming interested in material science and interested in energy generation and energy conservation. And I think that if you can be inspired by all these different fields that you might think are not related to design, then I think that using those tools, you as a human being with this amazing brain can synthesize innovation a lot more efficiently. So that's my message. Yeah.
Okay, please give an applause. Okay. So thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Professor Waldman, for sharing your valuable insights and experience today. We got a lot of questions, interesting questions, and we also extend our sincere thanks to everyone who participated and contributed to today's public lecture. We hope this lecture has provided new perspectives on circular design, innovation, and inspired your own projects, works, or future research and collaboration and innovation in the future. So on behalf of FSRD ITB Equity, thank you once again for joining us. Please give one more round of applause for us, for everyone, and also for Professor Matthew. We wish everyone had a wonderful day, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the future events. Okay, so just to remind everyone for the e-certificate, we'd like to ask everyone to scan the QR code and then put your full name and then affiliation and also your email. So we're gonna send it through your email. And before we officially conclude today's event, we would like to ask everyone to standing up and then take a picture together after this. And may I kindly invite Pak Banung, also all of the lecturers that come to this event today to come to the front side for the photo session.
And then if I can, I want to thank ITB, the really amazing hosts, and you have a gorgeous campus. And everyone here, really enjoy and utilize your time here because you have an amazing amount of tools and knowledge from your professors here. It's a wonderful opportunity for everyone to really dive into it 200%.
Has everyone take a picture of this QR? All good? Okay. Okay. So let's take a photo session. Prof, please maybe standing here on the center. Di mana? So please, guys, come to the center.